Introduction. Dear students, we are going to discuss corruption in all walks of life during this session. Are you aware that as of now, India is ranked 85th in the world in corruption? Corruption has become all-pervasive in Indian politics and bureaucracy. The Indian economy was weighed down by extensive regulation, public ownership leading to extensive corruption and slow growth. More than 50% of the people have direct experience of giving bribes or using political or other influences to get work done in public offices. Truckers and people using heavy vehicles pay 6 billion annually as bribes to concerned authorities to get past the checkpost without hitches. Bihar, arguably the most corrupt state in India, boasts of the most extensive range of corrupt practices. More than 80% of the subsidized food aid to the poor is stolen. Even top government officials steal state property and amass wealth in the name of their close relatives. In the first section, we are about to discuss corruption and the nature of corruption. We will be discussing corruption in various fields in the second section. In the third section, we will learn about corruption and how it affects the economic growth of our country. In the fourth, we shall discuss the causes and consequences of social problem corruption. In the last section, we shall outline strategies to fight corruption. Corruption. Let us now take up a small question. What is corruption? In simple English, it is a use of public office or possession for private gain. It can also be defined as the use of official rank or position for one's own personal benefit. A few examples of corrupt behavior are fraud, bribery, extortion, embezzlement, nepotism, and so on. Per the survey conducted in Jan 31st, 2012, 7,172 corruption cases are pending in courts. CBI registered 600 corruption cases in 2011, and CBI registers over 2,200 corruption cases in the past 3 years. These figures are really alarming to us. As India is a developing nation, corruption is widespreading in India. Do you know that India is now witnessing not just mere corruption but a national plunder? You will be astonished to know that India's corruption perception index is 3.3 in a scale of 10, where 10 is highly clean. Some of the reasons that lead to corruption are lack of effective management and organization, lack of economic stability, lack of support, lack of values, lack of love for the country, lack of satisfaction, lack of autonomy, lack of good control and vigilance, lack of good remuneration, lack of employment, lack of seats and educational institutions. The list is endless. One of the latest scams that has hit our country is the 2G spectrum scam. Few leading politicians were the face of the scam. This scam was really shocking to the Indian citizens as it involved a money of about 176,000 crores. Can you imagine all that can be done with this money for the growth of the nation? Per the survey conducted by the administrative section of government, Jammu and Kashmir and Bihar are ranked as the most corrupt states in India. What do you think will happen to the corruption scenario in 2 years? 46% of the Indian population say that corruption level will remain the same even after 2 years. A true citizen will not close his eyes to corruption, close his ears to corruption, and keep quiet about corruption. In recent years, corruption has been receiving multiple attention. It no longer remains a taboo. Corruption remains a challenge to all organizations that work for preventing this. Corruption is the most virulent when crises everywhere threaten the very existence of the society and faith in life is itself shaken. It has always been there like the Thai leech, but when the system grows weaker and the boat flounders, it gets bolder and drains the victim of all its blood. Eradicating corruption is not possible, but we can minimize it. It is the responsibility of each citizen of India to fight against corruption. Corruption in different fields. Let us discuss corruption in various sectors. First, let us see corruption in government offices. Generally, salary is paid to officials to perform specific duties that they are assigned to. But in India, the government officials expect bribes not for deviating from their responsibilities, but even to do their duties. Corruption has become rampant in cities. Municipal and government officials, politicians, judicial authorities, real estate, mafia, and law enforcement officials acquire, develop, and sell land using illegal methods. Many state-aided construction activities in India, such as road, building, bridge, constructions, public office buildings, are all controlled and manipulated by the mafia. Corrupt public works officials, material suppliers, politicians, and government contractors are substandard construction materials, which results in roads and highways becoming dangerous and washed away when heavy monsoon arrives. In government hospitals, accepting bribes for giving appointments with doctors, availing diagnostic services, and so on are very common in these days. Civil servants and public officials are rated as the second most corrupt in the country. The second segment we are about to see is politics. According to a global public opinion poll conducted in 2009, 58% of Indians identified politicians to be the single most corrupt individuals. 40% of the people felt that the government is ineffective in checking corruption in the country. The other sector we are about to explore is the private sector. We have often read in the newspaper about prominent business houses manipulating government officials and policies to suit their own interests. The affluent and the influential business houses use philanthropic activities as a cover to acquire various benefits and privileges from the government. The fourth sector is media. 8% of Indian residents believe that corruption in the media has a direct impact on the lives of people. Media is known to distort facts and hide certain realities and protect the interests of the rich and influential who patronize their publication houses. The common man fails to get justice as a result of this corrupt nexus between the media and their powerful patrons. The next and the fifth segment we are about to explore is the judiciary system. Indian judiciary also has its share of corrupt judges and other employees who complicate procedures and cause delay in disposal of cases. Almost 3% of the population in India considers the judiciary system of India to be corrupt. Anti-corruption tools such as the Right to Information Act for social audit, citizens' charters, and the use of technology are devised to check corruption, but majority of the population are not aware of these provisions. The sixth segment we are about to explore is the police. Torture and custodial misconduct by police is widespread throughout the police system in India. Police often torture innocent people to force them into confessing a crime they may not have committed. The original offenders may have been people who are influential and or wealthy and had to be let go free. Excessive police violence is due to the lack of accountability on the part of the police. The next segment we are to discuss is the corruption in religious institutions. This is also widespread. Baptism certificates are sold illegally to make quick money, and it is also believed that some members of the church are involved in this unfair business. The recent cash for Fatwas was a major scandal that exposed the imams of the Islamic faith accepting bribes for issuing random, often inconsequential fatwas. This creates an unhealthy climate for investment and an increase in the cost of government subsidized services. There are many sectors, but these are the sections where corruption is more in India. We will now learn the relationship between corruption and economic growth. Corruption and economic growth. We all hope one day that the world will be a better place for us without corruption, but that is wishful thinking. Corruption has a huge impact on the economy of a nation. There are people who believe that overpopulation is our biggest problem, and there are others who attribute most of our existing problems to corruption. Prevention of corruption is absolutely essential and very high on the political agenda of the Chinese government. But despite corruption, their economy has grown, and today China has emerged as a major superpower. The East Asia crisis of 1997 raises major issues related to corruption. Many experts attribute the crisis to the high levels of corruption in the regional economics. The relevant aspect of the East Asian miracle is a tremendous economic development that took place before the crisis. This proves that significant economic growth is possible despite high levels of corruption. The Indian economy has also picked up despite corruption, and today India is in the same league as China. Corruption is usually associated with a very high public investment, lower expenditures, low quality of public infrastructure, and low government revenues. But these factors deprive India of a good economic growth possibility. Corruption also results in increased public investment and decreased productivity. If corruption is minimized, public investments increase at the rate of 12% and GDP by 1.5% annually. The effect of corruption is visible on the public infrastructure of India. The best example is the construction of roads. The Public Works Department and the state electricity boards are responsible for this corruption. As we all know, a good rain is enough to wash down the entire road. The next day, the road appears shattered. This is one common example of corruption. They request big sums of money for the construction of roads. They buy low quality raw materials which result in wear down of the roads by one shower. Another example is bribery. From ration card to education seats, we witness corruption. For a student to obtain a medical seat, one has to pay approximately 25 lakhs of rupees. This is really shocking for the middle class people as they can't afford it. The capitation fees, as they call it, are used for their personal benefits. They even forget to build up and maintain their infrastructure with the fees obtained. India is slowly becoming a country where only the rich can afford education. What is the state of a nation where knowledge is expensive and non-affordable? The government must take necessary steps to stop this. But the most shocking news is that some of these institutions are owned by government officials. We cannot report this issue anywhere. The ordinary citizen finds himself lost. Corruption in politics increases injustice and disregard for the law. Due to these, basic human rights becomes a threat. Most of the police investigations are based on political favors or personal vendettas rather than real justice. We should be aware that corruption is tearing down our economy. If our economy goes at this rate, India will turn out to be the top corrupt country in this world. We, as citizens, are equally responsible for this corruption. So we should start reforming ourselves and then even influence the government to reform. Corruption, its causes and consequences. Corruption is considered as a global phenomenon. It is omnipresent. Over the past so many years, corruption has increased a lot and is now rampant in our society. Corruption is the consequence of union between politics, criminals, and bureaucracy. India is nowadays considered as a tough state. India is labeled as a consideration state because here in India, everything can be had for a consideration. Let us now discuss the causes for corruption. Corruption in India is smooth, not rough. And as our nation develops, corruption is also growing, inventing new methods to cheat the public and government. Learning and understanding the causes is a complex task. Causes for corruption. The first cause is the rise of corrupt or more selfish politicians. They are emerging at a faster rate. These elite politicians are interested in personal-oriented programs rather than nation-oriented programs and policies. The next cause is a change in the value system. Changes in the value of the system and also ethical qualities of the men who are in your administration cause the corruption to rise. The old ideals of service, honesty, and morality are regarded as antique, Another cause for corruption is the tolerance that people exhibit towards corruption. People tolerate corrupt activities of the officials to a large extent. This arises because of a lack of desire to protest against corruption. We must fight corruption as a whole single unit. Public are scared to oppose against corrupt officials. But being in the dark is not the answer. We have to bring them into light and expose them. The next cause for corruption is poverty. Due to lack of proper education, many people do not know what their rights are. India is known for its vast population. Several villages in India are still under the literacy rate. Due to all this, the illiterate people are the most who fall for corruption. Officials act indifferent because they know that the poor population won't rise up against them. Government officials' salary structure is moderate, not so plenty. So this is also regarded as a cause for corruption to occur. Low salaries of government officials force them to take bribes as tokens for their service. It's funny to know that a person passing out from IIM earns a handsome salary than our government secretaries. Election is the high time where there is much speculation about corruption. This is that time when corruption is at its peak. Politicians seek finances from big industrialists who in turn ask for personal favors. Bribery is at its peak. Bribery buys votes for the politicians. They give fake promises to poor illiterate people. They bribe them to get the votes. These are some of the basic causes of corruption. Now let us take a look at the consequences of corruption. Corruption is a moral as well as a developmental issue. It distorts the very political fabric of the society. It affects decision making and commercial transactions. Let us now take a look at the remedial measures for corruption. Remedial measures to fight corruption. Corruption is like cancer which needs immediate cure. Many leaders wanted to eradicate corruption, but nothing was changed. Later, it is they themselves who become the highly corrupt. Laws should be made equal to both politicians and to the common man. Role politicians play should be reduced in executing these laws. For this, cooperation of the people is necessary. It is people who elect these politicians to become their leaders. People have the right to recall politicians if they are in the wrong. The root of corruption is found in the funding for elections. It is one of the top political corruptions. Funds are needed for each and every activity of the election. Our bureaucracy needs to be friendlier, ethical, accountable, and transparent. As we've already discussed, the judiciary system is also a field where there is lots of corruption. More courts need to be established for faster justice so that cases will not linger on in courts. Local bodies like Lok Adalat, Lokpal, and Vigilance Commission needs to clear out some cases for speedy justice with basic expenses. Fighting corruption has emerged as a key development issue in India in recent years. More and more policymakers, businessmen, and civil society organizations have begun to confront the issue openly. At the same time, the general level of understanding about corruption has risen markedly. Until recently, it is not uncommon to hear someone discuss anti-corruption strictly in law enforcement terms. By contrast, most people working in the field today acknowledge that public education and prevention are equally important. The field has also come to appreciate how critical the role of civil society is for effective and sustained reform. A number of factors explain this growing emphasis on fighting corruption. Expansion and consolidation of democracy at the root level has enabled citizens to use the vote and newfound civil liberties to confront corruption, prompting leaders and opposition figures to show a stronger anti-corruption commitment. Internationally, since the end of the Cold War, donor governments have focused less on ideological grounds for foreign assistance and concentrated more on trade and development, both of which are undermined by corruption. Countries with high levels of corruption like India have found themselves less able to attract investment and aid in a competitive global market. At the same time, businesses within the country has faced ever stiffer competition with the globalization of trade and capital markets and has become less willing to tolerate the expense and risks associated with corruption. Conclusion. As we all know, corruption occurs mainly due to fundamental institutional weakness. The implementation of institutional reforms can benefit significantly from the participatory process that is being developed for anti-corruption activities. Equally important, any participatory process, however sophisticated, ought to lead to concrete results beyond enhanced participation and heightened awareness. Thus, identifying key institutional reforms in India and mobilizing support for such reforms needs to be fully integrated into the participatory process from very early on. Such early convergence is likely to promote a better balance between prevention and enforcement measures in addressing corruption. The gradual swing towards the middle ground has taken place due to recognition of limitations to expose legalistic enforcement measures, since the law institutions themselves are currently part of the corruption problem in India. Therefore, corruption is an intractable problem. It is like diabetes, which can only be controlled but not totally eliminated. It may not be possible to root out corruption completely at all levels, but it is possible to contain it within tolerable limits. We need more honest and dedicated persons in public life, more control over electoral expenses that could describe the best ways to combat corruption. Corruption has a corrosive impact on our economy and leads to the loss of overseas opportunities. Corruption is a global problem that all countries of the world will have to confront. Though it seems very difficult to control, corruption is not completely uncontrollable. It is but the responsibility of the government as well as ours. We can eliminate corruption if there is joint effort. We must adopt very high principles to follow so that we will be models for the coming generation. Let us make our atmosphere free of corruption.